Ah, the Flintstones. Meet the Flintstones, the modern Stone Age family. From the town of Bedrock, they're a page right out of history. The Flintstones is the first animated primetime American television series. There were 6 seasons made, and they were broadcast from 1960 to 1966. There were also many spin-offs and cartoon specials made, like the Flintstones Meet the Jetsons, which I remember watching as a kid. The Flintstones also had 2 movies made, The Flintstones and The Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas. The second movie, grossing only $59.5 million against his $83 million budget, was a huge failure compared to the box office success the first movie was. After Viva Rock Vegas, there were no other Flintstones movies made. The cartoon was produced by Hanna-Barbera, who were a cartoon powerhouse. You will know them also from such cartoons as Tom and Jerry, Yogi the Bear, Scooby-Doo, The Jetsons, and many more. The Flintstones was a successful show and therefore received tons of marketing and merchandising deals, and with that comes video games, and there were a good few in my time growing up. And with you watching, let's take a look at some of these games. The glory days of the Flintstones games, I do believe, lies on the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega, and the Game Boy. The 3 games I'm going to show you now are before my time and not worth looking into. Starting out, we have Yabba Dabba Doo, released in 1986 by Quicksilva for the ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64. Looks like somebody took a shit and put Fred Flintstone in it. This is Yabba Dabba Doo. Doesn't make me want to yell Yabba Dabba Doo. Makes me wish I wasn't alive. Awesome sound effects. The patter of feet. Firing this up, I had no damn idea what I was supposed to be doing. I just went as far left as I could, and then I did the same thing going right. Alright, I went on the internet and I found out what you're supposed to be doing. In Yabba Dabba Doo, the player has to help Fred win Wilma's heart. To do this, he must build a house by collecting rocks and putting them in the right place. I don't know where the right place is, but I'm sure looking at the details of the screen, I'm sure it exists. There are obstacles to this. Small rocks get in the way. Turtles bite your ankles, and pterodactyls drop rocks on you too. Also, while you're away, your neighbors will pinch bits. Fucking assholes. Once the house is built, you have to get Fred a car so that he can get to the quarry to work, thus earning enough money to hire a dino crane to put the roof on. Progress is measured by points. These are gained as you build the house. Get to work and finally find Wilma. Huh. Now knowing what to do, it doesn't make me want to play this any more than I already did. Alright, on to the next game. Up next, we have the Flintstones for the Sega Master System, where you paint a wall and babysit. Look at the dejected look on Fred's face. Fred, blink! Blink if you're being held against your will! Fred! Alright, on to the next game. Here we are, in 1991, and there's another Flintstones game called Dino Lost in Bedrock, released for DOS. Ah, finally a platformer. I love platformers, let's play! What the... Good God, the jumping is atrocious. There's input delay on the jump, and when you jump, you have to wait till you're at the highest point, and then either hit left or right to get onto the ledge. It's a goddamn science. I'd rather be painting a wall, I'm thinking. This game sucks. The controls are bad. It takes like 1 or 2 hits and you're dead. And you're supposed to somehow navigate through Bedrock to find Dino when you can barely get your goddamn guy to move fluently one single bit? What the... Wow. Good God, my ears! My ears hurt! My ears are bleeding. On to the next game.
Late Night Retro will return shortly after a quick word from our sponsors.
Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Will you be the one to experience the Nintendo Entertainment System? Comes with Rob, Zapper, Control Deck, 2 controllers, Gyromite, and Duck Hunt.
I told you. I told you those 3 games weren't worth looking into, but now we move on to the Nintendo Entertainment System, where we'll be looking at the Flintstones, the rescue of Dino and Hoppy, released in 1991 and made by Taito. Taito is a subsidiary of Square Enix. They're responsible for making such hit arcade games as Space Invaders and Bubble Bobble. Though they don't publish home video games anymore, they did back in the day and went wild with making Flintstones games. Most of the upcoming games through the Nintendo and Sega era are by Taito. The rescue of Dino and Hoppy isn't too bad of a game. Definitely not the best Nintendo game I've played, but far from the worst. Dino and Hoppy are captured by a man from the 30th century named Dr. Butler. He comes back to the past in a time machine, kidnaps the pets, and destroys the Great Gazoo's time machine, and scatters the parts of the machine across the world. With Gazoo's time machine destroyed, the pets are forever lost in the future and imprisoned in a zoo for public amusement. That is, until Fred sets out on a quest to retrieve the parts and rescue the family's beloved pets in this platforming journey that is called the Flintstones, Rescue of Dino and Hoppy. The game has you venture through 8 levels on your quest to rescue the family's beloved pets. The only playable character is Fred Flintstone. You will meet others along the way that give you information or items. The game allows you to collect items, which are hidden in barrels, and you can use them at the price of coins. Coins drop off enemies, and as long as you're bashing the enemies with your club, I never experienced a shortage of coins. The items can help while navigating through stages or fighting bosses. On top of the items, you can challenge some bald-headed middle-aged man in a game of basketball. If you win, he gives you superpowers, like the ability to jump super high or even fly. To use these abilities, they cost coins, double the amount it costs you to use your standard items. You can use the superpowers throughout the stage to get to places Fred normally wouldn't be able to reach. Usually these secret spots load you up with more items, health, or just make your adventure easier. So look out for those secret opportunities. The controls were fine and responsive, the graphics not half bad. The music could use some work, it's catchy but at the same time annoying. At least it's not a constant loop of the Flintstones theme, pulsing through my head like the Sega Master System game. Not bad. Not bad. Good job, Taito. Next up, we have the Flintstones, King Rock Treasure Island. Released for the Game Boy in 1992, another title by Taito. Another title by Taito. Title by Taito. Title by Taito. Now this game is a lot of fun. Surprising, really. I wasn't expecting much from it. But I must say, it was hard to put down. The game opens up with Fred at work in the quarry. He stumbles upon a slate that is a treasure map. He says to himself, "Gee, Wilma will be really happy if I present this treasure to her." Dude then walks off his job, goes home where his wife and friends wish him well, and next thing you know, he's off on a great adventure. Now this game is similar to the one we just looked at, the rescue of Dino and Hoppy. Instead of barrels, you hit open cans to reveal items, same premise. Sadly, you don't get to play a bald middle-aged man in basketball for superpowers. There are actually no alternative weapons to pick up, like in the rescue of Dino and Hoppy. You just get some throwing axes, similar to the style of Adventure Island. So no superpowers or alternative weapons, but in this game you get to ride on Dino, who is an item you find throughout the game. This will change your attack and give you more maneuverability. One mechanic I really liked in this game is you don't necessarily always kill enemies. Sometimes you just use them like stairs. If you hit an enemy once, it freezes them in place, and you can jump on them to get to higher ledges, or use them as a bridge to cross gaps. A really cool mechanic. There's 7 levels to play through in this game, and they sprinkle in side-scrolling driving levels, which are pretty fun. I guess they put those in the place of the basketball matches. The music in this game is catchy, upbeat, and nice. The controls work great. So in conclusion, pretty good game. Would recommend playing it. Plus, aren't you dying to find out what the treasure is Fred found? Up next, the Flintstones, exclusively for the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive. Released in 1993 by who other than Taito. The story in this one is pretty cut and dry. It's not an elaborate theme involving kidnapping or anything like that. It's simply at the beginning of levels somebody loses something or gets stolen from them, and Fred, being the concerned hero, decides to go out of his way to retrieve the items for his friends. At this point in time, it feels like Taito is just rehashing their games. You will notice that they brought back the ledge grab from the Nintendo game, and they brought back a rideable mount like they had in the Game Boy game. In this game, you sometimes find a pterodactyl that, like Dino from the Game Boy version, you can ride. The difference here is it's on a timer. You only have it for 19 seconds. While riding it, you receive half damage, can fly through the air, and it has a fireball attack. Fred has no other weapons besides his club, so having this fire-shooting pterodactyl is nice. It gives you a range attack where otherwise you wouldn't have one, and breaks up the monotony of the standard Fred platforming, which we became familiar with in the NES version. Also, to break up the monotony, they brought back the side-scrolling driving levels, like in the Game Boy version. They also added a Wilma icon as an item. By collecting it, you will become invincible for a short period of time. Like how the Game Boy version borrowed the axe throwing from Adventure Island, this game features more expansive levels and uses a checkpoint system, similar to the one in Adventure Island. I like the longer levels, and the music in this one is the best out of all the Flintstones games. In the underwater level, there's a song that plays, which is one of the coolest tunes I've heard in a video game in a while, and wasn't expecting it out of this title. Other than that, there isn't much to say. The graphics are very good, and it beats out the Super Nintendo one, which will come about a year after this one. Still in 1993, Taito isn't done. They can't stop their madness and release yet another Flintstones game. This one for the Nintendo, and one of the last releases the system saw. We're talking about the Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak. In the Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, you have the option to play as Fred or Barney. You can switch freely between them in stages by hitting the select button. Fred with his signature ledge grab move that we've seen in the first Nintendo game, and then in the Sega game, is back. Barney, however, cannot grab ledges, but he can scale ropes and climb up on them for a short time. Now, it's not a popularity contest. You will have to switch between the two characters to advance through the level. Sometimes they make you switch on the fly to get through obstacles. This game has some hella twitch action. They use this a lot through the game, so you gotta be on your toes. If you're unfamiliar with some parts of this game or you don't know what will be in front of you, prepare to die a few times. Fred is armed with his trusty club, which we have grown accustomed to. He can charge it and do a lot of damage, just like the previous titles. Barney's weapon you can't charge, but it's a slingshot, and the range of his weapon definitely makes things easier at times. You can collect throwing axes as a secondary weapon for the two characters. You don't spend coins to throw your axes like the first game, but instead you have a power meter, and throwing an axe takes 3 power, which is the default of your meter. After throwing an axe, your power will be depleted, but it does charge back. You can also increase the bars on your power meter. How, you ask? Well, that middle-aged balding man is back, and this time you get to challenge him in hockey and basketball. Be prepared, this balding middle-aged man trade hard since our last encounter. He's a bit tougher to win against, but still very defeatable. By beating him, he will increase your power meter, allowing you to throw more of your special item. This game is very similar to the first Nintendo game. They did make the climbing animations more fluent and responsive, which is nice. They also beefed up the platforming, giving you a bit of a challenge, and forcing you to be aware of your surroundings. I think Taito knew they were getting lazy with their Flintstones games, and recycling too much of their gameplay. I can tell they really wanted to make this one more of an experience than the last. I think they did a decent job. Taito was only to release one more Flintstones game after this, and I'm glad towards the end of their run, they sent us off with a Nintendo game. I have much love for the NES. This game is right up there with the Game Boy and Sega title, and it's worth playing along with those two. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around and watching. On we go to the last game that we will look at, and the last Flintstones game by Taito. Let's take a look at the Flintstones, The Treasure of Sierra Madrock, for the SNES. In The Treasure of Sierra Madrock, a meeting is called between the Water Buffalo, where the Grand Poobah announces he's stepping down as leader after 15 years of service. In place of his absence, the Water Buffalo will need a new leader. so he orchestrates a plan to find the best candidate by conducting a hunt for the legendary treasure of Sierra Madrock. Upon the announcement, everyone rushes out of the meeting in search of the treasure, and this is where the adventure begins. Now, Taito decided to go in a different direction here, and the world map functions as a game board. You roll a die, with 1 being the lowest and 3 being the highest number you're able to roll. Your goal is to track down a member of the water buffalo on every game board, and challenge him to a race. When you win the race, he gives you an item that allows you to move on to the next game board. The races are pretty simple, and the stages you play through as you move across the board are short and not memorable. I appreciate they were trying to change things up, but the platforming is shit. The stages and boss fights are very forgettable, and the controls at times feel slippery. You will recognize in a few levels they borrowed design from previous games and compacted it into short shitty levels that last about 40 to 60 seconds. Besides the water buffalo member on the game board, there is also Betty and Wilma. If you run into them, they bring you back a few spaces or so. Also on the map are cafes to replenish health, which doesn't regenerate between levels, and parks where you can spend clams, which you collect through levels to play minigames. The minigames allow you to earn more health and lives. The game is pretty easy, and I must say a disappointment. There is little fun to have in this game, but not a lot by any stretch of the definition. So that's that. The last Flintstones game Taito made, and the second to the last in the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Sega era. There is one more for the SNES, The Flintstones, the movie, by Ocean Software. I simply didn't like the style of this game, nor its sound effects and its mechanics, so I left it out. There are also 5 more games released by random publishers through the 2000-2006 era, including The Flintstones Bedrock Bowling in the year 2000 for PlayStation and Windows. The Flintstones Burger Time in Bedrock, released in 2000 for the Game Boy Color, essentially a remake of Burger Time. The Flintstones Big Trouble in Bedrock, 2001 for the Game Boy Advanced, probably one of the worst platformers I played. The Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas, 2002 for the PlayStation 2. It's a racing game. The Flintstones Bedrock Racing for the PlayStation 2 in 2006. Much worse than the racing game Viva Rock Vegas. And at this point in time, they just gave up trying, and this is where the Flintstones end in the year 2006. I played a little of all of these, and I must say they all are pretty bad. So just like how the Flintstones video game started, it's how they will end, being completely shitty and not worth a mention. This has been Late Night Retro. Until next time.